Hello, beautiful community. I have been asked to comment on an app, a parody app that made world news a few days ago. And it's an app that's actually old, but it got returned to Google Play. And it looked like it was government affiliated. And it asked Russians to denounce their neighbors and acquaintances. In fact, the app is a parody app, and something like 80% of the people who used it understood that, and they wrote various kinds of funny reviews. Things like, superb functionality, takes me right back to 1937, couldn't have expected a better product. But the point of the question is, what's going on with denunciations in Russia? Where are they going to go? Are they going to be a big problem in the future? Are they a problem now? And how does this affect our general thinking about what the hell is going on Russian territory? So let me just say a few things in a sort of theme and variation sort of way about this, rather than giving a definitive answer. And I've made a note of 3 or 4 quick things I want to touch on. So the first one is history. And that's that you don't get rid of what happened in the Stalinist period. And what happened in the Stalinist period was not just an extraordinary kind of repression, but a special blurring of the boundaries between perpetrator and victim, which had absolutely no qualitative equivalent in Nazi Germany. And Peter Pomerantsev got into trouble for pointing this out in the recent Guardian article, which we discussed on the second channel here, because he sort of casually wrote something like, well, at least the Nazis had rules. And he got pilloried for that. And you do have to be pedantic in the way you articulate yourself on the topic of Nazi Germany. But nevertheless, the basic point is that, that's true, and Peter was right. There is that very special blurring. So there is not just a matter of a difference of scale, right? There were so many more torturers in the 30s in the Soviet Union. I mean, if you take early Gestapo time and late GPU time, which is the predecessor of the NKVD, so we're talking sort of mid-30s, early to mid-30s, that we need a historian here, but I'd guess the number of sort of people deployed as torturers would be something like 10,000 in Nazi Germany and 250,000, probably more, in the Soviet Union. So there's that difference. But there's also the difference that anybody could be taken away, and that special blurring of the victim-perpetrator relationship isn't something that Russia has recovered from, even though nearly a century has passed. Next thing, depoliticization. Russians are actually terribly disinclined to denounce because they want to stay out of politics, and denunciation is a political act. So that's a very strong push, a very strong barrier to denunciation. In fact, given the intensity of hyper-identity politics in the West, the culture of denunciation at the moment is much stronger in the UK and in the United States than it is in Russia. The only difference is that in the West, people denounce each other for saying the wrong thing and, at a push, create employment problems for each other, or just stress and inconvenience, whereas in Russia, a denunciation is, Ricky next door is listening to the Ukrainian anthem on his speakers, and he needs to be taken away. So it's of course a totally different level of seriousness, but nevertheless. But that doesn't mean that the depoliticization can't, first of all, transform into something else, right? Which is a kind of fascization of society we talk about. Depoliticized societies can get fascized. But there is also something else that, for some people, increasingly, denunciation could be the price one pays to stay out of politics, right? And here we're talking about fear, which is the next thing I wanted to mention. And fear, and it's very important to understand this about fear. When you are really afraid, and you're afraid because essentially your government is against you, is kind of at war with you, at least it would be at war with you if you began to express yourself. What happens isn't that you're just afraid to say what you think. It's that you're afraid to think what you shouldn't say. And that's a much deeper problem. And it's very important that, of course, we acknowledge that you can't compel belief in people, right? There's no amount of, force you can impose on someone that'll give you the ability to control what they privately think. But nevertheless, there are mechanisms in which we can slide from just having people not say what they think to them ceasing to think what they can't say. And the final theme in this sort of theme and variation quick episode I wanted to air is something very culturally prescient, a kind of a cultural sickness that you find in Russia. It's one of Russia's top 5 cultural sicknesses. And that is the idea that everyone is bad. If you have a deep sense of Russian culture and its deformations, you know that that's a cultural item that swims about relatively ubiquitously. So what does it mean? It could mean that nobody is good, right? But I don't think Russians really think that. What they're closer to thinking, even though none of this is a thought, it's just a kind of an image that swims in the subconscious. But what they're closer to thinking is that good cannot become a viable social power, right? So good cannot become a meaningful force in politics, for example, right? Being a good person is something that's for the private sphere, and then in the public sphere you could try to be a good person, but that never really works. And so when people engage in projects of collective cooperation, that nobody is good, everybody is bad cultural item makes people think, well, you're an idiot to do this because that stuff doesn't work. Your intentions might be good, but you're an idiot. If you want to organize politically, you're an idiot. There's something missing in you, right? There's a part of the fabric of society that you're simply not grasping. And I suppose what I'm saying here is that is a cultural pathology which is conducive to the escalation of denunciation culture, even though denunciation culture right now in Russia is low, very low. But there are real prospects of escalation. Now, fear will be driving that, but there are other cultural pathologies like this one, right? Nobody's good, that are going to play a role. And I suppose one final thing worth saying, that's really important to say about denunciation, is how, denunciation is like a drop of poison you put into a glass, even though there are, thousands of other drops in the glass that aren't poisonous. The whole glass becomes contaminated, right? So put yourself into the education dynamic, right? I mean, you're taking several classes, school level, university level. There's 20 folks here in your class, 60 folks there, and then 40 there. It's enough for one to feel, perhaps driven by fear, right, that they should denounce something, for the whole social exchange, social ritual you're engaging in to become contaminated and immobilized, right? So this is the trouble with denunciations, at very, very low levels of denunciation, unless they're absolutely tiny, can already become a big problem. It doesn't look like Russia is there yet, but I certainly am predicting an increase in denunciations. Lots of love. Main channel video coming possibly tomorrow evening. It's very close. Bye-bye for now.